What's up, bookworms? Welcome to episode 92 of the Cantina Book Club podcast, where readers can find interviews with authors of all genres, trad or indie published. I'm Megan, self-proclaimed content queen, here to bring you insights from the authors themselves. Each week features a Cantina conversation with an author. Sometimes they're returning guests, sometimes it's someone new. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on an episode, and feel free to browse through existing episodes so that you could catch a previous interview about a book you finished. Just a heads up that I often use adult language to express my feelings towards these authors and their work, whether the characters need to get their shit together or I'm encouraging the badass FMC to fuck it all and burn the world down. Just please be mindful around listening ears. And also, it's June, happy Pride Month to all who celebrate. Cantina Book Club is an LGBTQ plus friendly space. Keep an eye out on my social media for book suggestions if you want to support authors in the LGBTQ plus community. Check out previous interviews and keep an eye out just to see the next guest could be your favorite author or someone from that community. So happy Pride. For all of you Chicagoland Midwest readers, I'm going to be a panelist at Books in Bloom, taking place July 11th and 12th at the Sonesta Chicago O'Hare in Rosemont, Illinois. The event is hosted by Chicago North Romance writers. For details and tickets, visit chicagobooksInbloom.com. I really hope to see you guys there. And as for books coming out this week, keep an eye out for Smoke on the Wind by Kelly Estes. I haven't started it yet, but I'm going to be interviewing her later this week, and I'm really excited to share an update about it, but just to keep it on your radar for the interview that's going to be coming out within the next couple of months. Today's episode features a chat with Amy Weinland Daughters. We're talking about her book, You Cannot Mess This Up, a true story that never happened. So this is one of those stories where it's like a memoir, but it's not really a memoir. She kind of imagined what a real life time travel story would be like if she reluctantly traveled back in time to her house when she was 10 years old. So it was interesting. I really enjoyed talking to Amy. Like, our conversation was so fun and enjoyable, and it was so easy to talk to her. I would explain the book to you guys, but I think Amy will do a better job. So without further ado, here is Amy Weinland Daughters. So today we've got Amy Weinland Daughters. We're talking about her book, You Cannot Mess This Up, a true story that never happened. Amy, thank you so much for joining me today. I finished this book not a long time ago, so it's fresh in my brain. Really humorous, really interesting concept. And I didn't know where you were going to go with it, but I enjoyed the time I spent seeing where you went with it. It was a really cool and fun story. So I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to discuss it with you.
Absolutely. So to get started, can you share a summary of the book so that listeners can follow along with the conversation?
Basically, I write myself back in time to my own childhood. And the vehicle I use is I'm supposedly flying home I live in Ohio at the time. I'm flying home to Texas to discuss my parents' plans, like end of life estate plans. And while I'm in the plane, I get transported back to 1978. And then I have a time travel guide who was the pilot, and she drives me basically to my childhood home and says, look, these people think you're a distant cousin. They don't know who you are, but you have to spend 36 hours inside. And so she drops me off, and I'm left with grappling with my two parents who are the same age as me in the story, with my back in time self. And then there's my 12-year-old sister, my 8-year-old brother, and then my 10-year-old off the chain self. And so it's 36 hours. It's super relatable because it's 36 hours back in your own childhood, looking at the way you remembered everything, look at the way everything actually was, only after living a whole nother life before you went and saw it again.
Yeah, it was funny because at first I was like, when I read the synopsis of it, I was like, all right, how is she going to go there? But then it was really funny because the readers have traveled with you where you don't know what's going on. And so it was like, okay, the readers are allowed to really be confused at first too, because so are you as the narrator. But it was really interesting. And we'll get into it of all the layers and the implications and the reflection that you did in the book. It was just so funny because it was a memoir that's not a memoir. It was just like a snippet of you imagined what this might have been like. But then, because I'm curious, like we'll get into it because a series of questions I usually ask
ask are in line with what I would say, what's your background? This book goes into a snippet of it. It's like
Right.
that you make the reader you familiarize the reader with who you are and what you do and your family life and your background and stuff like that. I want to explore that, like how, yeah, like your background and what led you to bring this unique story to the world.
And I love what you said that it's a memoir because really it is a memoir wrapped up in the tortilla of time travel. So it's a fiction book, so that gave me some leeway. But I came upon writing inspiration because I have a business degree and I was in like purchasing for 15 years. And then my husband's job
Mm,
moved us to the UK for 3 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, this will be a great adventure. I had a 4-year-old kid at the time. And I was like, this is going to be great. We're in our 30s. What an adventure. But then I left my full time job when I got over there. The kid went to the village school, and I was like, wait a second. What am I going to do with all this time? So I took some history classes at the local university, but that wasn't enough. And I'd always written on the side like short stories, or I'd read my emails at work and think they were profound or hilarious. And so I started writing in England because I was desperate to do something. And by the time we left, I had created a little niche for myself with freelance writing. And so once I really started writing, the idea of this book had always kicked around in my head. But I really had to, my journey in writing had to get to a point where I could take myself seriously enough to write it. But my whole intention was I'm going to write a funny back in time book. Like it's going to be hilarious. Like where there's going to be polyester and smoking and no hand sanitizer. And I'm going to write myself back to my childhood and have to watch myself. But once I got into the meat of writing the book, I was like, wait a second, this is going to be like feelings.com because you can't write yourself back into your own childhood and really look at it without
yeah.
unpacking a whole lot of stuff. And so what I ended up doing, and a lot of people have asked me, so did you work with a therapist? I'm like, no, I'm just funny. I'm just funny hot girl. But it turned out to be a catharsis because the real meat of the story, it is funny, but it's so relatable because it's me facing my child self, my parents, my mother. It's facing all these relationships and looking at all these memories through the lens of someone who's in middle age. So it's like a bombshell of emotion.
Yeah, I thought that was so I want to explore your process because I imagine were you a plotter or were you a pantser? Because I'm like, okay, what points did you want to cover? What parts of your pieces of your past or topics did you want to explore? Because you do, like you said, you have to confront some things and you imagined a lot of how certain conversations might have gone down or how people might have. It's like, how do you perceive something 36 years older? Like, how do you explore a situation of adults at Thanksgiving when your recollection of it as you experienced it, you were like in bed by a certain time? Like you were, cause that's totally true. Cause it's all of us as we're getting older, we realize like when the generations, they get older, they start having kids and then they look back, wait, how was I at this age? How was I at these things? And what did adults think of me when I was this age or that or what during this time in my life. And so I thought that was like interesting, like cool how you explored that. And I kind of want to talk about like how like what your process was. Like did you plot it out? Did you have an idea? Did things jump out at you without even expecting it? Stuff like that.
And I started with this core group of memories that I thought were either funny or that I remembered them for some reason from around that time period. And I was going to shove them all into the narrative of this book. But when I sat down to write it, I, and I, it's almost like I went on this mental trip. And I spent a couple weekends because I had little kids at the time that I wrote this book. And so I went to this 70s resort in Ohio and spent 4 or 5 weekends. And I brought the VCR and I brought the photo albums and I imagined myself back in time. And so I had these core memories and I was going to use them as part of the narrative. But as soon as I walked in the door and imagined myself through the door, I was like, wait a second, and thought about after watching videotapes of myself jumping around all over the place, being out of control. I was like, my reaction to her would be, oh my gosh, please stop that right now. You are killing me softly. And then looking at my mother, it all came up in the emotional, just in the deep thought about what that would actually look like to walk through that front door and experience those people. Because I looked at my mother and I was like, wait a second, this woman is just trying to survive 1978. And I could identify that from my life in the 2000s, but I realized she didn't have near the freedom I had. She didn't have near the expectation that she could go do something else. She didn't have near the support system that I have. And I was like, wait a second, this woman is a rock star. And so a lot
Yeah.
of it I just came on from the imagination, from imagining the situation, and then did a lot of heavy research on the time period, which I loved. But
I was gonna say that's a good segue into what I'm curious about, 'cause I'd like to step back in time and to just so many funny moments where you would accidentally slip up and ask or mention things, or and then you had to be like, "Wait, was that did that exist yet?"
right,
And I love how some like there was a couple sentiments in there where you were like, "These people deserved much better technology than what they were getting."
they were trying to get that football game on a TV, and I was like, wait a second, these people are like, this is
Yeah.
the best TV we've ever seen. I'm like, that is crap. Your TV is crap, and
Yeah.
no one's telling you.
Yeah.
And that was really, I like nostalgia and older things like the Sears catalog, all that. So that the big joy in the whole thing for me was the research. But really, again, as I imagined myself back in time, I immediately imagined the things that I would miss. Wait a second, I don't have this. Wait a second, I don't have that. So it was easy to bring those things up, but there was a lot of research to get me there. I spent a week in the Houston Public Library going through all the newspapers from that week, reading magazines from that year, looking at catalogs. And then the great thing is, like YouTube, you could spend 2 days watching 1978 newscasts. You can watch commercials. You can watch, and actually, my first editor, the editor, was like, "We have got to cut back on some." That's one of the things I needed help filtering through because I loved all of it, and
Yeah.
we had to pick some of it. But actually, when I signed her copy of the book and mailed it to her, I like tried to like bullet point all the scenes we cut because so she would remember this
You,
is,
like, annotated it for
yeah,
her
yeah,
reminder,
just a
like
reminder that was a great part and we cut it, but I feel good about it.
that's hilarious. I love that. Kind of a running inside joke. Oh, thank you, by the way. Like, you might find some surprises in here. That's hilarious. Yeah, because I think I was born in the late '80s, so, like, my a lot of my nostalgia is, like, from the '90s, but I know that, like, my parents, they were born in, like, the '50s, so it's funny, like, how I mentioned, again, as I get older, I get more curious and
Hmm.
wondering what was that like. Because 'cause I'm like, I'm sitting here, I'll watch, like, the Elvis movie or something, or I'll watch something that was, like, and I realize, "Holy crap, this was in my parents' childhood or teenagehood where this is at this point in their life when this monumental thing happened, and, like, when Elvis died, you were a teenager when Elvis died." So I'm like, that's so crazy to me how and it's remembering that. So that's why I always like to ask about the research just because and especially with such a unique thing like this, because authors that I do speak with, when I talk about the research with them, it's the same thing. They have 2-3 hours of one topic that maybe makes 2 sentences
Right.
in their books. It's such a common thing, but I love it because it's like that's such an enjoyable part of writing a book from with the common sentiment is that it's so enjoyable, but then they're like, it's really tricky just deciding what makes it in, and it's just kind of, no, this is really important. I gotta like, no, I gotta add the context. I gotta add like everything I learned to so that the reader appreciates it. But it's a balancing act. You gotta there is a nostalgia of it and there is the authenticity of it, but then you gotta make sure that you're not losing the reader with
Right.
all this like info dumping and stuff like that.
Because you detract from the story. And I was also amazed, like you said, that like Elvis died when I was a teenager. I remember that. But when I wrote the book, I realized like that John F. Kennedy had been shot 10 years before, it wasn't 10 years, it was like
Yeah.
15 years before 1978 when I was 10 years old. And it was like, oh my gosh, that was like that just happened in relative
Yeah.
time. And then I lived. And the other thing that amazed me is when I did the research, there was like the fuel, like people lined up for gas during the fuel crisis. And there was things that I lived through that I don't remember from being 10, but I lived through this amazing time that I don't remember living through as a 10-year-old.
Yeah, I love that. That's it's so funny to me because there's so many historic like moments and just someone from my generation is we've lived through so many historic moments, but at the time it's different. Like even you touch on memory too towards the end of the book of you're reflecting throughout everything, but towards the end of the book you're really like that's your time to be like, "Oh, existential," like, exploration, and I thought that was so interesting 'cause it's yeah, like, it's that time you experience it then, and then when you're older and you look back and you're like, "Oh, yeah, holy shit." You're like, "Wait, that was significant," and I didn't think about for example, with the Twin Towers, I was 14. I think I was, like, in just beginning of freshman year, and at the time, I was like I did not appreciate it or understand the significance of it, but then as I got older, I was like, "Oh no, this was a big deal. This was like so significant." And then certain, like, surely enough, some years later, it started showing up in history books that I was picking up. And
Right.
so it's like stuff like that where, yeah, you look back and you're like, oh, because when you mentioned like the Kennedy got shot, that was a huge deal. And that was like unheard of. And people were confused and scared and they didn't know what to do or like how to feel about it or what to say about it. Because when I read historical fiction and stuff, a lot of those occasions, those the historical events will come up. And then for me, I'm just reading it through this literature or through other accounts of it. But I like can understand like, no, that was significant. That was a big deal. That was really confusing and people were lost. And even just like the funeral or the procession afterwards and then how the characters from whatever book they react to that. And then that's the kind of thing, the context of it that not a lot of the history books just don't explore, kind of facts. They don't really explore like
How it
what kind of impact that had on like the nuance of it, the opinions, and from point A to point B to point C, like from all walks of life, how it affected them. That
And what you said about you remembering the Twin Towers is such that's illustrated so well in my experience in writing this book because I looked at my younger self remembering things and I realized she could only remember them in the context of a 10-year-old through the lens of
yeah,
being a child. And she was, and that, what you said is as you got older, you saw it in history books and you started to realize, wait a second. And that's exactly the journey of writing this book. Like looking back and saying, oh my gosh, you've messed it all up, little Amy. But she didn't mess it up though. She was just, that's what she was capable of. But I
yeah,
realized though, I let myself off the hook. I let her off the hook. I let my mom off the hook because I realized everyone was just doing the best they could. And then I put that into today's context with me having two kids and being like, wait, I'm doing the best I can. And there's such hope in that. That's really the story is we were all doing the best we could. And by me
yeah.
going back and looking at it again through a 50-year-old something's the lens of being a mom and a wife and all the other things, it's wait a second, mom did the best she could. Wait a second, we all did the best we could. Little Amy did the best she could.
And yeah, and I really enjoyed, I think the points that resonated with me was your discovery of your mom and like her situation and from her point of view and from a different perspective, like not just as her daughter, but like this was your chance to interact with her as an equal, as a guest, but as an equal, like at your age, you were also a mother and a wife, and you would already, there was like that a little bit of camaraderie, but that like this, what is it, the sisterhood of motherhood. It's like you reach that level of human and it's like the same level of human even if it's 30 something years apart. So that's the one of the pieces that the running themes that resonated with me was that you had a new outlook on your mom and you had a new appreciation for her where you're like you saw in real time how the kind of mother that she grew up with and like how, oh, this kind of explains, not like excuses, but explains why your mom was the way that she was. It's because, and again, it's like you're looking at generations and generations. You're like, each generation is like a little more lenient or a little bit better than the previous one. Like, at least that's what that reminded me of. But yeah, I thought that was like so heartwarming and also heartbreaking, just recognizing and seeing your mom as like an equal, even if it was like kind of time culture shock, you were still, you recognized that, you acknowledged it, and you were, it was a little bit like you as big Amy in 1978, you were like, oh, you understood her on a different level and you were like, okay, okay, like this kind of makes sense. And you like you could anticipate her behavior and her attitude, but then there was also these things here and there. And then we can get into the sensitive topics of alcoholism and stuff like that, or maybe undiagnosed, but it was self-medicating, and how exploring how that fit into your childhood too, like how you all grew up and you knew, and it makes me reflect too. I'm like, oh yeah, like how do my kids see me at their age? What are they going to
Oh
remember
yeah.
and stuff, and what are they going to think of it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and putting mom in context was it was a really healing thing for our relationship because it's this funny back in time book and now we have a different relationship because of the book. But those sensitive topics, and I know this is something that authors who write memoirs are more, but that kind of happened to me like, what do you include? And then once it goes out there, you're like, wait a second, now everyone knows. And those are in writing a book like this and sharing those sensitive topics. But I think what ends up happening, it frees you because now you're walking in the land of honesty and it frees readers too because it gives them the opportunity. But just that sharing is turns out to be a positive thing, but it's a scary cliff to jump off of, though, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, because oh god, you're 100%. Because I've spoken to a couple authors about memoirs specifically, and that is like they have to just rip the Band-Aid off and they have to let go. And they have to just be vulnerable. They can't just half-ass it. They can't just let a little bit out.
And I had this editor I worked with, and she was the one, first of all, who like had to shut me down, and not just shut me down, but she's like, "You're hilarious, but we got to get this all into context." But she's the one, and I look at her as being the reader's advocate, because there was a couple moments in the book where she made me say more. She pushed me further, because she was like, "People, you cannot leave the people hanging." But personally, that's hard to do, and that's where working with someone who's very talented, who can help push that out just a little bit, turns out to make the book a much more meaningful experience for the reader, because it's real.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And you're digging deeper for yourself. And yeah, that's amazing that your editor was like, you're holding back. Like,
Yeah,
you
no, and
gotta,
it was like two specific. There was one specific thing that was really difficult, and that's where she mainly pushed. And she's like, "Look, you got to put this in context. There is context. You're just not sharing it." And that's super hard. Now, if I would have been writing a fictional character, that'd have been completely easy to do. And that's what made
yeah.
this tricky, but also I had the gift of the tortilla of time
Yeah.
travel. And so I could, because people ask me all the time how much of it's true and how much of it's not, but I could slide that gauge. But I will say that almost everything except for the dialogue was true in some way, because the dialogue was made up, because I can't remember exactly
Yeah.
what anyone said 35 years ago.
I will commend you on that because sometimes when people, even when authors, when I've read fiction and people coming up with dialogue with fiction, and it just it doesn't flow, and or it just seems forced and unnatural. But like for you using real people, but imaginary conversations, it was still I commend you for making that seem natural and flowy and authentic because it's just like you're making it up either way. But it could be tricky because it's like you're like you want to respect the real people in your life even if they have no idea. I don't know. Do they have any like how many people knew what you were doing and knew that they were going to be featured in
Well,
this
my brother
story?
and sister and my mother and father all knew what I was doing. And
Yeah.
my father basically told me, don't ask for permission, just do what you want to do, which was, but I don't really think he knew completely what he was getting himself into. And I was so scared so I got it was before the
Was
event.
he like, what, you think I have a pancake butt? Like what?
That's right, exactly. And no, that's beautiful that you said that. But I didn't even have advanced reader copies. It wasn't even the advanced copies, but I had them printed out like at FedEx office. I went home for Christmas because I still lived in Ohio at the time, and so I basically on the way out of town, I dropped a binder off at each of their houses, and I left town because I was so scared.
That's hilarious.
And the book was coming out in like 6 months. And I literally drove 17 hours home and was like, I'm out. Like that was going to protect me. But my friends were like, Amy, you've got to give them the book. You cannot just blindside them. And so I gave it to them and I left town. And this a really poignant story about that though. They all read it.
You're like, I'm done confronting everything. I
Right.
am done. No more. Here it is. Don't talk to me about it.
And we don't talk about our feelings, which is a major theme in the book. And my brother and sister loved it
Yeah.
right away. And my mom read it, and I was super scared about that. But she did nothing but show up. And she loved the whole question was, Dad was a great guy, but was he the right guy for her? She was living the dream, but was it really the dream? She loved all those
Yeah.
investigations. But then Dad was the last one to read it, and he sent me a text and was like, I loved your story. I felt like I went back in time with you. I felt like you handled the sensitive issues really well. And then he would always put dog emoji, dog, because he's like a 79-year-old man, and that's what he did. And so the book went to print like 2 weeks after that text, and Dad passed away suddenly. He wasn't ill or anything.
Oh,
He just died, and that's the last text I ever got from him.
oh my
But if
gosh.
my wonderful friends would not encourage me to drop the binders on the sidewalks, I
You
would never have gotten that text. And that text
no.
absolutely changed, because otherwise I would have so much regret, because my father was my hero, which is well documented in the book. But it's such a testament to who we are to each other as friends. We laugh and be like, Amy, get the binders out at the minivan.
They
Let's
call
go.
you out on
Yeah,
it.
and
Oh my
and they gave me the
gosh.
gift of that final text, and so I know it's like I got a book review from Dad.
Oh my God, that is so amazing and meaningful and heartbreaking. And I'm so sorry that, but I'm also, what a blessing, what a
What an
gift
absolute
that,
gift! Yeah,
yeah. Oh my God. That just adds like another layer to like how meaningful that would have been for you and your family to step into your head and to be like, I feel like that, yeah, that would be interesting. If any of my siblings or my family members, immediate family members wrote anything about their memories, I'd be like, yeah, like what's my part in it? And even if did it paint me in a favorable light, or it's like, how much did they reveal about our family, like how protective would I feel? But I feel like that's amazing that your dad was like, no, this is great, and this it gave him something too.
right.
And I just, oh, what a gift for both of you.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's so wild. That's so crazy to me. Oh my gosh. That's amazing though. It's like it's what a like double-edged sword, or it's
No, in all the
yeah.
pain, it's a gift. And the other amazing thing that happened in the journey, we talked about the research of writing the book. Like I said, I lived in Ohio. The home was in Houston, and when I was writing the book, the home went up for sale. And so I flew back home and scheduled an appointment to look at it like as if I was going to be a potential buyer.
Mm,
And my brother and my sister and my mom and dad went on the tour of the home with me. And that gave me such facial recognition, like such
yeah.
a hardcore line on because I was and I don't the timing was just almost like magical, like there was unicorns involved in the engineering of the whole story. But to get to walk through the front door, even though the house had been redone, and to just occupy those spaces as a fivesome again, as I was writing the book, I think it really helped me in describing the scene and how the house made me feel physically. Because we always say everything looks smaller when you go back, but I had that actual walk to the front yard. I did that walk while I was writing the book, so that was a huge advantage for me as a writer.
Yeah, I can't imagine because I have my childhood home is not that far from me, but I that area is just, it's been, God, 25 years since I've lived in that house, and
Right.
I still maintained some friendships, so I was still visiting that area, but now I'm like, I can't imagine, because I remember it was a big deal that we were leaving that house. Like everybody we knew, our family members, they're like, "Oh, they're moving?" It was so significant, but I was like 14 when we moved, and so it was like we that some I can relate to that nostalgia where you go back and you're like, okay, we're just gonna pretend that maybe we're looking at this house, but it's really just, what does our house look like now?
Right.
And what kind of feelings is that gonna inspire in
Exactly.
on the, yeah, like you're gonna like, I can't imagine how that experience went. And then I think that's so magical and adorable and meaningful that your family was like, okay, let's go.
Oh yeah,
Like,
and
right.
who does that? And we have a picture of the five of us in front of the house, and like the intercoms were still in there. We have pictures with us at the
Oh
intercom, and
my God.
that's in the book. And it was just again, it was a gift. It was just a total gift that I got. And maybe the universe decided to bestow that on me.
You know what? If that's what the universe was pushing for you, I would say just take it. Just
Oh
be
yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah,
I'd be like, you know what? Thank you. That is so unique, timely, and coincidental almost that you
right.
were able to make all that work and to have those people, those meaningful people there for you through all of it. I love that. I love that. So, is this your first published book? If you've been writing, have you had stories or anything like that published in other works?
I did my main gig in the freelance writing. I wrote about college football for
Oh, right.
most of
Did
it.
that any of like your that's hilarious. I know, I love that. I love like your whole reflection on that as like little Amy and versus like how you grew up, or like how you're interacting with women and married women in the 70s, and be like, yeah, I write about sports and I work and I left my husband and kids like
Yeah,
for Thanksgiving of all holidays.
yeah.
I kind of want to explore, did your career or any professional experiences, anything, skills you learned, did any of that transfer or prepare you for this project?
I think yeah, obviously the writing all leads to other writing, so you improve upon that. But I do like the links back to the book where I was sorting the baseball cards, and then I became the girl who wrote about statistics, sports statistics. And so I don't know that I totally made that link before I wrote the book. I do have another book, but I do think that Yeah, I think I was completely prepping to be someone in sports the whole time I was growing up. But in the 70s, that was not, nobody was looking for a little girl. And there's a lot of that in the book where I watch myself, where there's the Pro Football Digest sitting next to the Barbie head. And I was both girls. I totally loved Malibu Barbie. I also blew up the Barbie head with a chemistry set, and I collected baseball and football cards and loved that. And stayed up in the middle of the night sorting them by statistics. So I was all those girls. And I think that's the other theme I really like in the book, is that I started when I looked at myself as a child, I was like, oh my God, get away from me right now. You are
Yeah.
embarrassing. You are killing me. And by the end, I was like, oh my God, I want to be her. I lived all the good parts of
Yeah.
us away.
Oh, yeah, I love that too, because it's like again, it leads me to think, oh, what would my 10-year-old self, how would I interact with them? How would what would my opinion be? And yeah, exactly, after 36 hours, how would that, and oh, would she be proud of me today? I'm like, I don't even know.
That's
I
exactly
don't
it.
even know. Yeah.
Part of the gift of the book is now I want to honor her. Like I almost, and this sounds like I'm a nut job, but I almost look at her as a separate entity that's in me somehow still. Because after my dad died, I was like, oh, I don't want to tell her. And she's going to be so upset if she finds out that dad died. And that sounds like I'm a crazy person, but I think I identify that this is this great person who's a part of me, but lived separately, completely.
Well, yeah, it's natural to immerse yourself get yourself in the zone where you're really like, okay, in the context of it, in the situation, like imagining yourself and really immersing yourself, and where you can't help but have that mentality.
Right.
And it might be a little crazy, but for the sake of your project, like
Right. That's
it
what it
makes
left me with.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, again, it just made me reflect on, oh, would 10-year-old me, how would I look at it? And then my kids are 4 and 7. It was like, I'm looking at and how they're almost done with the school year, which is crazy to me. And then in 3 months, my oldest is going to be in third grade. To me, that's crazy. And I feel like that's where a lot of my solid core memories start, like where it's, oh, yeah, I can remember some of my experiences, some of my friends. I can remember my teachers and some trips that are like how memories from living in the house. Like I can remember that. And so like your story of like you revisiting going back in time against your will, it made me reflect on those things. Yeah, what would I think of? What would I remember? What would, and what would my kids, because yeah, you do reflect on, like, your kids do make a good impact. They are still very present with you in your story. You keep bringing them up and you're thinking of them, and you're a little self-conscious about it. And again, it brings us back to, what, I'm doing my best and my mom did her best.
Right.
And like really, it's like, little Amy, everything's gonna be okay.
And it's
It's just like one message that you would tell like your younger self, and in this true story that never happened, you were able to do that.
And there's so much healing in that. And what I've been so shocked by, not surprised, is that people who've read the book has said it's been cathartic for them too, because it's not a blueprint to do anything, but it's just something to think about in your own life. And what a great thing to be a part of for me is that other people have felt like they could. Even my kids have. My younger kid is 19 and he's just read it for the first time, and he's no, I totally thought about back if I went back to your house when I was 10. And of course that's my biggest fear, that my
Oh.
kids write that book, because oh my God, they're only going to see one side of me. I say that in the book in the last chapter, or in the second to
You're
last chapter.
yeah,
I'm like, oh my God.
you're giving them ideas now,
Yeah,
like
please do not do that. Please do not drop a binder on my sidewalk. I cannot handle the truth, because it's perceptions. Memories are perceptions, and they're selective. And I think we
Yeah.
create this bank of memories that has helped us survive or identify with what we say ourselves is or our history is, and they lead to that mental state. But I think looking back and unpacking them is in a healthy way is not a bad thing, because we realize that our reality can be shifted and who we are can be shifted even at age 55 or whatever. We can shift that reality.
And you have your memories, but did you remember them correctly? Was your brain did your brain perceive it, and then did your memory change over 30 something
Right.
years? Yeah, because I'm thinking like even when I talk to my mom, like I have heart to hearts with her, and she'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I remember when you were this age and you did this or said this." And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, I never did that.
Yeah. I didn't doubt that I did it, but I was like, why do I not have any memory? Yeah.
And that's why that
It's
conversation with my brother and sister, which was a real conversation at the end of the book where we're doing all the memory talking, like you said, that's based on a real conversation because they were like, I don't remember that at all. But and we all remember different things, and we were all right there experiencing the same thing. And their memory bank, even though our memories are woven together, theirs is different than mine, and we live the same thing. And we all know that's a simple truth about humanness, but it does have a profound impact, and it makes us realize that memories are malleable. They're based on who is doing the remembering. And that's why, like the 47-year-old version of myself would have remembered things totally different than my 10-year-old self. It makes all the sense
yeah.
in the world, but it also reminds us that our truth is not 1,000% truth, though it's true to us.
And it could even mean it can mean like your truth can be like what your memory, it could be true in one way as you're experiencing it, but then it can also be the truth and how you perceive it can also transform and it's still the truth.
Right.
It's still, even though it's like opinionated, but it's still, this is your experience and now you're looking at it in a different light. You're seeing it with this new, your collective experiences and your collective knowledge and wisdom that you've acquired over the span of however many years that you're revisiting it. And that's, yeah, it was such that, I thought that was so cool, such a cool thing to explore. And also just, I thought that's so fun that how you had that real conversation with your siblings. And because then that kind of just shows that they were like, I mean, from the impression that I got was that you've always been close with your siblings, like
Right.
even maybe reluctantly at one time,
Yeah.
but like you maintain that relationship and that the friendship adjacent relationship where it was like, no, you actually enjoyed spending time with each other and you found comfort in each other and you didn't feel awkward with each other at all. Because again, that's another thing where I'm, oh yeah, how would my siblings, if I asked them this existential question, what? I'm kind of like, oh, how would that conversation go? Maybe I should just do it randomly, like next time I see them. Like,
Right.
what do you guys remember? But I bet that would just open the floodgates.
Oh,
Just
and it does. And that's what the book did
yeah,
because they
yeah.
discussed what they thought that like memories they had that weren't in the book. And but it does open that up. And I think the book's made us closer too. We're close already, but they've enjoyed like there's scenes in there, the Gong Show, that's a real scene, but they think like the pee pillow, that's real. And they think that's hilarious. And anyone else in the whole world would know that now.
They're
But
like, no.
yeah, but yeah, no, but they totally, and they will say this, I have the best memory out of the three of us. But I think
Oh
that's the way
wow.
my mind works. And they're like, oh, but then they'll say, oh, there she is making up her memories again. You like, but that's completely human too, though. Cause like you said,
Yeah.
your mom would say something or your sister would say something. You're like, I don't even remember that. I don't think that even happened. Oh,
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Or like I would remember like a snippet and then they would take it further. And yeah, even just like something whereas because you do approach and you are vulnerable about some of your like the dark times in your life
hmm
and you're reflecting on that and you're like, oh, what would they think if they knew or what would they think if they knew the whole thing of it? Because that kind of reminds me of similar sentiments of where I'm like, um because you're looking back at it and you can't help but reflect on it because it's opening a whole nother layer of you look at the hard times and then years later you reflect on it and you're like, you know what, I'm glad I pulled through. I'm glad I because again, it's so easy to say at the time, oh, it's you just think of the possibilities, think of the potential, you're going to rob yourself of everything in the future, but then at the time you're just in a dark space and you're like, it doesn't, I'm not even, that's the point. And then later when you're reflecting on it, you're like, okay, you know what, this was still significant, but I'm glad I pulled through. Because I personally, for me, I've been that resonated. I'll just say that those sentiments resonated with me. And I remember, I promise I was going somewhere, why my mom conversation, she had said, I don't remember this conversation, but she said that according to her, I approached her and I was like, something's not right. And that's luckily, I'm really glad and fortunate that she was like, okay, let's do something about it. And that's when I started my resources, as that's when I started going to seek help with her help because I said something's not right. Like I need to do something. And she listened. And again, that's a conversation I don't remember. And I'm like, when she told me that, I was like, holy shit. I was like it it reflects, it's like again, it adds another layer to we are who we are. And then when we grow up we're still the same person. We're still the same little kid. We just learn more about the world and we learn how to act. Like
Right.
it's,
How to fit in, kind
and
of, if we have
yes,
to.
yes. Yes, and so that's, like, a part of your, and we don't have to go any further than that, but that's just, like, talking to my mom and the memories and stuff like that. That's what that reminded me of, because it also tied into the experiences that you kept reflecting on and you kept bringing up,
Right.
and so I can't imagine if that was, like, if that was ever, because also your family, they just don't talk, but I just don't know if that was ever brought up, or if your parents knew, or your family knew, or if there was it was anything at all, and again, we don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but just saying that's like a connection that I made and that reminded me of like my own experiences and stuff like that.
Yeah, and some of that's really powerful what you said. And then to, to me, it's super powerful that you had this conversation with your mother that changed this trajectory of where you were going and you don't even remember it. Think about that. Think about the things we don't remember and the power they have. So we can't, we don't have all of that. I know for me, I still don't know about some of the stuff I wrote about how much my parents knew and didn't know. And with some of that stuff was never discussed even after the book. I could say my mom's still alive. I could bring it up with her, but to me, the healing has come now, though, and that the details are. It's not that they're not necessary, but we have covered a lot of the details. So I don't know that I'm not. I don't feel better about all of it, and don't need to unpack it with her. But I did not discuss some of the more difficult things that I put
Yeah.
in the book with her.
Maybe that was okay. Maybe that's a safe thing. Maybe you guys, it sounds like you covered a lot, like you already crossed that threshold
Right.
when you did have the conversation with her.
When I,
Like it wasn't,
yeah, and I think
you weren't necessarily ready to go there.
right. And I think the thing is, and
Yeah.
one of the powers in the book is now I know she knows, and she knows that I know. And now I sound like I'm going to say something like, and they knew that someone knew that
Yeah.
somebody else didn't know, but I'm not. But really,
Now she knows that I know that she knows.
but that's it. But that knowing that we're not on the same page, because in the epilogue I say I went and talked to her and we didn't agree on all the finer points, and I was like, but the point is we talked about it. The point is it's out in the open. The point is it's not a secret anymore. And I think maybe there's more power in that than one agreeing on it or two bringing it up in conversation. But every relationship's so personal, especially a parent-child relationship. You
Yeah.
know that the approach that worked for me is not going to work for everybody else. The approach that works for you is not going to work for everybody else, and it would be dangerous to advocate for that, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Because it does, it's everybody has their own terms. And if you, yeah, it's like you can approach something a certain way and it'll just be a disaster, or that'll close them off or scare them away. But then you just got to find, if you need to, if you feel like you need to, you can find how to approach it to where that person feels like, oh, this is a safe space. Oh, like
Right.
this is, it's safe to open up. It, and that could be so difficult. It's a fine line to tread for both parties, because
Oh, it
I
is.
imagine like your mom probably didn't, she was probably overwhelmed and learning these new things about you.
I
And
can't
then
imagine. I
you're,
can't imagine what my
yeah.
parents thought reading the book. And when the I did like the book launch, and she was sitting right there on the front row, and I told people, I was like, this is my mother, and this is an example of love and grace, is what this is. And that example to me too was life changing. That wouldn't have happened without the book. I was
Yeah.
like, she loves me no matter what. She loves me no matter what's in this book. She loves me even. I'm just saying that's super powerful stuff, and it's a credit to who she is.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, in despite or in spite of her own upbringing, and because it is like the whole Thanksgiving, the fact that it was Thanksgiving, it was like, oh yeah, like it should be, maybe, I don't know, I'm thinking, oh, hands on deck, like any volunteer hands on deck. But back then, it was either she was a product of the times or her upbringing, where she felt like the bar was raised and there was expectations and she had to do things. And I can understand how she was like, she seems like, I just need to do it myself type of
Right.
thing, or I just need to do this because I needed to be this way. And it's just, but then it was like noticing the before and after through your story, where it was just like she puts that pressure on herself for those certain events, but it's also just like an extension of who she is, where she's just, oh, she is worried about the unknown guest in her house, and she's worried about the perception, even though she's never met this guest, still a stranger, and she's just like, yelling at little Amy, "Oh, can you like, okay, enough." And or Amy, behave yourself. She's just still, she feels responsible and she feels like there's a standard.
When
And
she's got this judgy mother, and then little Amy should be on ADHD medicine, but there wasn't that in 1978. Seriously, I saw that. She was just trying to get to
I
the
was gonna
next thing.
say,
She was trying to get me
yeah,
to fit in so she wouldn't have to listen to her mother. And then in 1978, the box was much smaller and tighter. You go back to the
yeah,
baseball cards. You go back to me playing football in the yard, me being a tomboy. And mom just wanted to get to the next day. And I
yeah,
could see that in her. And she had this woman commenting on everything she did. And nothing was good enough. Mom wasn't good enough. And then you think about that, and it's just profoundly sad.
yeah.
And then it also explains why she was like, Amy, little Amy, for the love of God, pull it together, woman.
Yeah, because you were, it seems like you were the wild card. Like,
Oh, I was off the chain. And I love that scene at the Bonanza Steakhouse at the end where I say what I'm thankful for. And I'm
yeah,
like pounding on the table saying all this bizarre stuff. And my dad's,
caught everybody off guard. Like, what?
and I think I'm hilarious. I'm the same person I am now. And I think actually, yeah, back to honoring my younger self. That's all I want to do. But I also want to honor my younger brother and sister and my 40-year-old parents.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think that was like, that was, it was adorable and that was so sweet. I could feel that from your storytelling of you didn't, you were honest, but you weren't like condescending or like derogatory. You were just like, oh, had the penis, so like this was
Oh,
expected of him. And Kim knew she was just like,
the
she had
princess.
a fashion sense and she would just had it all together. And you were just Amy in the middle, and the Barbie fanatic didn't. Because it's funny because like it's like no matter what generation, no matter what decade, it's like kids are kids
Right,
and personalities are personalities because it's just society's like expectations. Because if little Amy was living today, it wouldn't necessarily like ruffle any feathers. It wouldn't, people wouldn't think much about it. They would just be like, "Oh, okay, be careful when you're blowing your Barbie's head off." Like
yeah,
it wouldn't be like, "Oh, no, you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to grow up to do that." It's just, "No, that's okay. Just I don't trust you not to burn the house down." It was just like, at least that's kind of perception I get. So I think that's, yeah, it's fascinating. It's like how much little Amy would have just, what kind of welcoming or upbringing she would have gotten if there wasn't such a tight like box as you were saying
what if
with.
she would have grown up in the 90s or now? It would have been completely different.
Yes.
But I think that you reflect back now, it's clear to me that my perfectly imperfect parents were perfect for me.
But that's how I see my parents now, and it's just, I understand it. I recognize it. I have a better description of it, of them. They were just very hands off. But then the older I get, like we keep saying, it's no, I see their personalities and I'm seeing it from a different perspective, especially after I became a parent. And where I'm like, and I can recognize my traits that I just picked up on them, just not necessarily parenting styles, but just from my personality, where
Right,
I'm like, and but it's really funny because my husband and I were like total opposites, so it's just very interesting in our household. But I'm like, our kids are just gonna learn how to, with a lot of different types of people.
right,
That they're just gonna get used to the dichotomy of it. But then another author I was speaking to about, it was about his book. He was like a child family therapist, and he was like, you know what? Like kids, they see it in their teachers and all sorts of adults that they interact with. They all have different personalities. That's not a horrible thing. Like kids can identify it and they can get used to it and they can learn from it. So he's like, kids, it's not unheard of. So if you're worried about you and your husband being opposites in the household, and you just got to watch out for if they're like, oh, that you and your husband are communicating because they're like, oh, I'm gonna go ask mom, or okay, I'm gonna
right,
go ask dad. That, which is such a common thing in families. It's just they kids, no matter what, they do that. So it's just, yeah, it's just like getting a little like self conscious about it, but again, self reflective, and like how my parents were, how I am as a parent, how I see them, how my kids see me, how my parents see me as a parent, stuff like that, where it's just, it's so interesting. And there's just like there's a unique opportunity there to just explore, like
right.
amongst the intergenerational households, or maybe even not households, it's just family relationships. I think that's so fascinating. So you mentioned this earlier. What were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
Yeah, the challenging parts for sure, the memories that I had that were super personal and difficult and referred to things that would happen in the future and just sharing on that level. And like I said, that I had a good reader advocate in the editor that I worked with, but those parts were hard to write. And And even some of the parts that were emotionally satisfying were hard to write. There's the scene where I'm talking to my younger self in my bedroom and I'm putting her to bed. And that was super. There were some hard parts in that conversation, but as much as it was gratifying to imagine that scene, it was also super hard to write because it was just profoundly emotional and
Yeah.
soul stirring. And but the easiest parts to write were the humor, because that's what I like to write. That was super easy because I crack myself up and zap. And that's probably the thing one of the things I'm proud of is I feel like the book goes really like deep, and then there'll just be some kind of spam of humor, which I like. I like that about the book. But and then the research was the easiest stuff to write. The nostalgic things, I could have gone on and on.
I can imagine that because once you get like a solid understanding of it, I could imagine how you were like, "Oh, I got this." Like, I gotta. That would totally be a realistic. If that happened with time travel, it would totally be a realistic like a reaction where you're like, "Oh shit, we don't have seatbelt.
Yeah,
There's only a windshield separating my baby brother from the street." Like
right.
what? Yeah, it's just those moments like that. Absolutely,
Yeah, and when
absolutely.
you're
It's
looking
so
for your phone
important.
to take a picture, that's
Yeah.
immediate. Oh my God, everyone's got to see this, and you're like, there's no phones
Yes.
here.
Oh gosh. And yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, back to the TV thing, back to just how common smoking was
Yeah,
and
all of it.
yeah, I just that's yeah, but absolutely that was totally mandatory. If you're gonna do a time travel based story, you have to get those details down
Right.
and you have to have your character reacting to those details. And then feeling deprived and feeling
Oh yeah, and lost without technology. And I love when I was
yes.
sat down to write my younger self, a note, and I was like, oh, I could use a quote, and I was like, wait a second, I don't have Google, I don't have a phone, the encyclopedia is
Yeah.
downstairs, but I'm gonna have to come up with whatever this is straight ass out of my head. And you
Yep.
think about that, if it's being on the Wild West frontier of no technology. And
Yeah.
I love that scene because I'm not that smart without the phone. I am, but I'm just saying we don't do it anymore. So it's not a
We
practical
kinda yeah,
skill.
we're depending on it. We've got the luxury, and we don't even treat it as a luxury anymore,
Right.
which also reminded me of one of your parents' friends who, like, bought, like, a fancy smanchy, like, recorder or
Oh
something
yeah,
like
that little
that, or, like,
Olympus
it
Pearl
had
recorder.
FM radio, and he was like, "How much did it cost?" He's all and you're like and then you had to write yourself a note, like, "Okay, how much did this really cost?" Because
Yeah.
it was like yeah, like, the little did we know something that size or something smaller than that size we could search for any answer on the earth. These people were freaking out over this stupid expensive like
Right. Like $400 for,
thing.
yeah. Yeah. Basically like a Walkman that didn't even do anything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it was the bee's knees. It was a
Oh
big deal.
yeah.
It was like, yeah, I love that. So let's see, just a couple more questions. What do you hope readers get out of You Cannot Mess This Up?
Well, I hope first of all that it's relatable. They go along this adventure, this time travel adventure, and they enjoy it. They put themselves in the protagonist's shoes. I hope they laugh out loud. I hope they literally spit their drink out in public somewhere when reading it. But I also hope that they walk away and realize that by me sharing my story, that all stories, all life stories are important and significant and profoundly important, regardless if whether any of us is going to be on Good Morning America or not. They matter enough to explore, to investigate, and to share. And I think that's a really important part of the story because that was part of my journey in writing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's again, like I've shared with you this whole conversation. That's like partially of what I got out of it, where I was like, it made me reflect on mine, like, in my, like, how do I fit in to my nuclear circle and to the big picture? And yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I would say I can't speak for all readers, but this reader got it.
I'm so glad. Yeah. Very humbled by that.
Yeah, and with a little humor in there, you know. So, yeah, you can't help it. You can't help it. I think, like, just with your personality and you're just, like, looking at, like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, little Amy." You're
Yeah, and I've always been prone to humor, so yeah, yeah, some of it's really funny. And some people have said I was too hard on little Amy, but that's how I felt writing it after watching the videos and looking
But
at the pictures.
yeah, I
That's
feel
my
like that's so
reality.
natural, though.
Yeah, yeah,
That's so natural, though. We're also, like, hard on ourselves, and this kinda just speaks to you're thinking about this one incident where other people, they're not even they don't even think about it. Where you're, like, you remembering your most embarrassing part of your life, and Other people might not like, oh, I forgot about it in 2 days. Like
Right.
that, not, and yeah, absolutely. What advice do you have for people who might be like embarking on similar projects, whether it's a memoir, whether it's exploring their past, or whether it's even doing something similar to what you did with this book?
I would say to I think we all have things inside of us that we want to do, and it's just a matter of trusting ourselves just enough to take one step forward, trusting our own crap just enough to take one little small step forward, because I think that's really when our lives begin to change, when the worlds around us change, is when we all have something inside of us. But I think we watch other people do things and we think that's how we have to do them. And I think that we all have a lot of answers inside of ourselves. It's about trusting it enough just to do it. Because I think one of the parts I like about the story of writing this book is I wasn't trained to be an author. I wasn't trained to be a writer. And I spent so much time thinking, you're not a writer, you're not an author. And when I met with that editor for the first time, I said, and she had read this huge manuscript. I was like, so what do you think? Do you think it's a book? And she's, what do you mean? I was like, do you think it's a real book? And she's, I don't even know why we're having this meeting if it's not a real book. And but that's where I was at with it. And so I'm glad that something
Imposter syndrome.
but
Yeah.
I'm glad
Yeah.
that something inside of me just compelled me to keep going, regardless of how I really felt about it. So I think all the time, I just believe your own, till this day, just believe your own crap just enough, just long enough, just 15 seconds longer, just 2 minutes longer in order to take this step forward. And I think that's the answer.
That's solid advice for a lot of people who are just have self-doubt. Like, give yourself a shot. Just keep thinking about it. Don't let that one instance of self-doubt or be like, "Oh god, no, wait." That one small thought of never mind. Just get past that. Because
Right.
give yourself a shot. Give yourself a chance because you never know if you just follow it through.
And maybe be that
Yeah.
friend, like my friends with the binders, but be that friend.
Yeah.
We could be friends to each other that supports that inner let's go. Because that's what I want to do. I want
Yeah.
to go, let's go right now.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's just sometimes you gotta be your own cheerleader, but then, like, it's best when you have other people like, "No, dude, do it." Just a little push or a little yeah, absolutely. So, Amy Weinland Daughters, what is next for you? Are you working on anything that you can talk about?
I'm working on another book idea, but I haven't really gotten far enough to where it's a humorous historical fiction. So I'm hoping to do something totally different. But yeah, I'm working on it, but a lot of balls in the air, so we'll see how long it takes me.
I think you definitely have a knack for historical fiction. Follow that thread. Again, self-doubt, give yourself a shot because I feel like and then, hey, I understand that maybe you wanna feel your momentum, but I'm like, just it takes the time that it takes,
Right.
just from, like, other authors that I've spoken to where they're like, "Yeah, I don't know," like, where you were saying this book you were working on for however long,
Yeah,
you
5 or 6 years it took to.
Exactly.
And I think that's solid advice because I think that you know, that's the obvious question is, what are you doing next? But give yourself time to get there, though, because like you said,
Yeah.
it's not really going to work until you're where you're supposed to be to do it anyway.
Yeah, that's how I that's how I live my life. That's how I make myself feel better. I'm like, "You know what? Just have faith that nothing's whatever I'm working towards isn't gonna happen overnight." Like 4 or 5 months down the line, I might be, like, perfectly positioned, um, to go Godspeed, you know what I mean? So it's just you never know. You never know. Just like how you were saying, trust the universe. I feel like maybe you've gotten a little proof from the universe to
Hmm.
trust it. Oh, like
Absolutely.
exactly. Okay, so Amy Weinland Daughters, where can we find you online and on social media?
Right. If you go to amydaughters.com, that's got my I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, but all the links are there. My email address is there, the books are there, and I'd love to hear from people. So all the things are on amydaughters.com.
Perfect. Yeah, just feel free to bother you,
Oh, no, I would
like
love it. Me and Little Amy like to receive email and any other
I
communication.
love that. That's perfect. I love that. You Cannot Mess This Up, a true story that never happened. That's available now. Amy, thank you so much for your time and for your authenticity, for diving a little bit deep, for just opening yourself up. And when and if you're gonna release whatever you're working on, feel free to keep in touch. I'd love to chat again.
Okay, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a great conversation, and you ask great questions, so thank you very much.
And there you go. That was Amy Weinland Daughters talking about her book, You Cannot Mess This Up, A True Story That Never Happened. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book or where to find Amy online and on social media. Please also find Cantina Book Club online and on social media. I'm working on the YouTube channel, so as long as you guys are keeping up with that, I totally appreciate it. Rate, review, subscribe. If you need book recommendations, please check out cantinabookclub.com. I'm always reviewing books from all sorts of genres. If you're finding books that you like and you want to leave a rating or review, it really does help them out. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.